Nate stood at the bar, holding a vodka soda and wondering for the 100th time why he'd let his friend talk him into coming. This wasn't his scene, but Jenna had insisted. "You need to let loose for once in your life," she'd said, practically dragging him out the door. "Second thoughts?" A voice drawled beside him. Nate turned to find a man leaning casually on the bar next to him. He was the kind of effortlessly attractive that made Nate feel self-conscious just standing near him. "I'm sorry," Nate stammered. The man smirked, an amused grin on his face. "You look like you're planning your escape route." Nate let out a nervous laugh. "That obvious?" "A little." He extended a hand. "I'm Cole." Nate hesitated for a moment before shaking it. "Nate!" "Nice to meet you, Nate." Cole's voice was smooth, like he wasn't trying, but still managed to sound enticing. "So, what are you running from?" "Parties. Crowds. Pretty much this entire situation," Nate admitted. Cole chuckled. "Well, how about I make it more bearable? Let me buy you a drink." Nate hesitated, but something about Cole's easy confidence made him want to take the risk. "Okay." As the night went on, Nate found himself relaxing in Cole's presence. They talked about everything and nothing, movies they both loved, the best pizza places in the city, and random childhood stories that left them both laughing. By the time the bar started to clear out, Nate's usual overthinking had been drowned out by a few too many cocktails and the magnetic pull of Cole's smile. "Want to get out of here?" Cole asked, his voice low and intimate. Nate knew exactly what he was implying, and for once, he didn't stop to analyze it. "Yeah." As soon as they got inside Cole's apartment, Cole was on him, their mouths crashing together in a heated kiss. It was fast, intense, and unlike anything Nate had ever experienced. Cole was attentive, guiding Nate through every kiss, every touch, like he'd been waiting for this all night. Nate's hands pulled him closer, needing more. For once, Nate let himself feel without overthinking, letting the night carry him away. But as Nate woke up the next morning, reality hit him like a train. Nate slipped out of bed, his heart pounding for all the wrong reasons now. He couldn't stay. He couldn't deal with the aftermath of whatever this was. Nate quietly slipped out the door after dressing up, leaving Cole behind without a second glance. The next Monday, Nate stepped into the sleek, modern office of Cole Tech. It was his first day on the job. This job was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to push himself out of his comfort zone. "New beginnings," he muttered under his breath, trying to ignore how nervous he felt. A friendly HR representative, Carla, greeted him and led him through the office. "You'll love it here," she said. "Our CEO is amazing to work with." Nate nodded absently, focusing on keeping his nerves in check. As they reached his desk, Carla added, "You'll get to meet him later today at the team meeting. He loves to personally welcome new hires." "Great," Nate said, his stomach in a twist. He set up his workspace, trying to focus on the task at hand, when a voice announced a team meeting over the intercom. With a deep breath, he followed Carla to the conference room. As the room filled, Nate took a seat near the back, keeping a low profile. He was flipping through his materials when a familiar voice rang out at the front of the room. "Good morning, everyone." Nate's head snapped up, standing at the head of the table, looking as effortlessly charismatic as he had that night at the bar, was Cole. His Cole. No. Nate's brain stopped functioning as Cole's eyes scanned the room, lingering for a fraction of a second too long when they landed on Nate. Recognition flashed in Cole's gaze, followed by amusement. "I'm Cole Mitchell, founder and CEO," Cole said, addressing the room. "I'm thrilled to have you all here, especially our newest team member, Nate Parker. Welcome to the family." Nate wanted to sink through the floor. Back at his desk, Nate tried to focus on his work, but his thoughts were a mess. Why was this happening? Out of all the companies in the city, why did it have to be this one? And why did Cole have to look even better in a tailored suit than he had in his casual bar outfit? Settling in okay? Nate jolted, looking up to see Cole, smirking and leaning casually against his desk. "Why, yes, sir," Nate stammered, his face burning. "Sir?" Cole repeated, his tone laced with amusement. "That's new." Nate's throat went dry as Cole leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "I think the last time we spoke, it was just Cole. Or am I remembering wrong?" Nate stuttered nervously. "Relax," Cole said, straightening up. "We'll keep it professional, of course. For now." And with a wink, Cole walked away, leaving Nate's heart pounding. For the rest of the day, Nate could feel his boss's eyes on him, and it was driving him insane. By the time Nate escaped to the break room for coffee, he was exhausted. He grabbed a mug and began pouring when a voice startled him. "Long first day?" Nate froze, nearly spilling his coffee. Cole stood in the doorway, leaning casually against it, arms crossed and a smirk on his lips. "Just needed some coffee," Nate mumbled. Cole stepped closer. "Well, I hope I haven't made things too difficult for you." Cole's voice was playful. No, everything's fine, Nate said quickly, looking down. Cole chuckled softly and leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. Good. I wouldn't want to scare you off again. Nate looked up only to find Cole's face much closer than he expected. For a moment, he couldn't move, caught between panic and the undeniable pull he felt toward this man. Enjoy your coffee, Cole said, his tone casual again as he straightened and turned to leave. But before he walked out, he added over his shoulder, Oh, and Nate? You're terrible at ghosting. Nate's face burned at the words. A week later, the team was invited to a dinner to celebrate the company's latest success. Nate debated skipping it, but Jenna, his friend and the company's marketing lead, insisted. You can't avoid him forever, Jenna said, nudging Nate as they entered the restaurant. Plus, free food. Nate sighed, wishing he could disappear. As the evening wore on, Nate kept his distance from Cole, sticking to the edge of conversations and focusing on his plate. But Cole, of course, had other plans. Mind if I join you? Cole said, and without waiting for an answer, he sat on the chair next to Nate. As they ate, one of the newer employees, a tall, handsome software engineer named Ryan, started chatting with Nate, and Cole's demeanor shifted slightly. Ryan was friendly and funny, and Nate found himself laughing at his stories. But when Ryan leaned in a little closer to Nate, Cole's smile became tighter. So, Nate, Ryan said, what's your favorite part of working here so far? Before Nate could answer, Cole cut in, I think he's still adjusting, aren't you, Nate? The interruption was so sudden that both Nate and Ryan glanced at Cole in surprise. Yeah, Nate said awkwardly. Cole's smile returned, but there was a hint of something sharper beneath it. Good. Wouldn't want anyone making you uncomfortable. Ryan backed off slightly, clearly catching the undertone. The dinner eventually wound down, and Nate was more than ready to leave. He slipped out quietly, hoping to avoid further interaction with Cole, or anyone else for that matter. As he walked toward his car in the parking lot, the sound of footsteps behind him made him freeze. He turned to see Cole strolling casually toward him, leaving without saying goodbye. Cole asked, I didn't think it was necessary, Nate replied, trying to sound indifferent, but failing miserably. Cole stopped a few feet away, tilting his head as he studied Nate. You've been avoiding me all night. Just busy, Nate mumbled, looking anywhere but at him. Cole let out a low chuckle. You're a terrible liar, Nate. What do you want, Cole? Nate snapped, his frustration finally bubbling over. Cole's smirk faltered, replaced by a serious expression. I want to know why you ran that morning. Why you've been pretending like nothing happened when we both know it did. Nate's chest tightened. Because it didn't mean anything, he said quickly, though the words tasted bitter as he said them. Cole's eyes darkened, and he took a step closer, his voice dropping. It didn't mean anything? Funny, that's not how it felt to me. Nate swallowed hard, his back hitting the side of his car as Cole closed the distance between them. Cole wasn't touching him, but the intensity of his gaze and his close proximity were enough to make Nate's knees weak. Look, Nate said, trying to steady his voice. We work together now. Whatever happened, it's in the past. Let's keep it professional. Cole's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. If that's what you want, I'll respect it. But just so you know. He leaned in, his voice a low murmur that sent shivers down Nate's spine. I don't believe for a second that it didn't mean something to you. And I'm very good at proving people wrong. Before Nate could respond, Cole pulled back, his expression calm again. Good night, Nate, he said, leaving Nate standing there, breathless and confused. The following week, the office buzzed with news of a leaked internal report. The document contained sensitive financial information, and the company's reputation was on the line. Employees were being questioned, and tensions were high. Nate kept his head down, focusing on his work and trying to stay out of the chaos. But when HR called him in for questioning, he felt his stomach drop. Inside the small conference room, Cole was already seated, his usual playful demeanor replaced by a serious expression. The sight of him like this was both intimidating and strangely alluring. Nate, Cole said, gesturing for him to sit. After he sat down, the HR rep asked a series of questions, all of which Nate answered truthfully. He had nothing to hide, but the weight of Cole's gaze on him the entire time made it difficult to concentrate. When the questioning was over, the HR rep left, but Cole stayed behind. You handled that well, Cole said, his tone softer now. Thanks, Nate muttered, avoiding his eyes. Cole sighed and leaned back in his chair. Nate, I know this has been complicated, but I need you to know that I trust you. The sincerity in Cole's voice made Nate look up, and for a moment, the tension between them felt like it might break. Thank you, Nate said quietly. Cole stood up. Get back to work, and don't let this mess get to you, he said before leaving. The following week, Nate stayed late to finish a project. The office was mostly empty, except for a few others also staying late. One of them was Ryan, the software engineer from the company dinner. "Hey, Nate," Ryan said, leaning against the wall of Nate's cubicle. "You've been killing it lately. Need a hand with anything?" Nate smiled, appreciating the gesture. "Thanks, but I'm good. Just wrapping up." Ryan lingered, chatting about work and dropping hints about grabbing a drink sometime. Nate didn't think much of it. Ryan was always friendly, but the moment took a turn when Cole walked by. "Nate," Cole said, trying to sound casual. "A word in my office." Nate glanced at Ryan, who looked confused, then followed Cole down the hallway. Inside the office, Cole closed the door and turned to face him. "What's going on with you and Ryan?" Cole asked, his voice low. Nate blinked. "Ryan? Nothing. We were just talking." Cole's jaw tightened. "It didn't look like just talking. Are you serious right now?" Nate asked, crossing his arms. "You're jealous?" Cole didn't deny it. Instead, he stepped closer, the space between them disappearing. "Maybe I am, because the thought of him putting his hands on you makes me want to throw him out of this building," he said, sounding utterly frustrated. Nate's breath caught, his heart pounding. "Cole, you drive me insane, Nate," Cole murmured, his gaze flicking between Nate's eyes and his lips. "I've been trying to give you space, but watching you with him." Cole trailed off, his hand coming up to rest on Nate's wrist. Before either of them could say anything more, the sound of footsteps in the hallway broke the moment. Cole pulled back. "Go home, Nate," he said, his voice steady again. "Get some rest." Nate nodded, leaving the office with his heart still racing. The culprit that leaked internal reports still has not been found, and the tension in the office reached a breaking point the next day. Everyone was on edge. Nate tried to focus on his work, but it was nearly impossible. It wasn't long before HR called him in again. His palms were sweaty as he walked into the small conference room. Cole was already sat on a chair there. "Nate," the HR rep said with a stern expression, "we've been investigating the leak, and we've uncovered something." Nate's heart pounded in his chest, and he glanced at Cole, who was watching him with a reassuring look. "We've reviewed the emails and the access logs," the HR rep continued. "It turns out the leak came from within your department." Nate's breath hitched, his mind racing. "But I didn't do it." "I know," Cole said, his voice firm. "We believe you, Nate." The HR rep paused for a moment before continuing, her gaze moving between the two men. "We've identified the culprit. It was Ryan." Nate blinked, shocked. "What? Ryan?" Cole's expression darkened. "It seems he accessed the report and forwarded it to an external contact. He's already admitted to it." Nate felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. Ryan, the friendly guy he'd been talking to just days ago, Ryan, who had been so casual with him, had been the one to cause the chaos. "Why?" Nate asked, still shocked from the revelation. The HR rep looked uncomfortable. "He's been under investigation for other matters, and he was trying to cover his tracks by throwing the blame on someone else." Nate started, but Cole interrupted him. "Don't worry about it," Cole said, his tone unusually cold. "We'll handle it from here. He'll be removed from the team immediately." Nate nodded. After a long silence, the HR rep stood. "Thank you for your cooperation, Nate." "Cole, we'll be in touch if we need anything else." As they left the room, Cole turned to Nate. "You okay?" Nate nodded slowly, still processing everything. "Yeah, I never saw it coming." Cole gave him a small smile. "Sometimes people wear masks, but I'm glad you didn't panic." Nate smiled, pleased by the praise. The office was quieter than it had been in weeks. The scandal was finally resolved, and Ryan was no longer part of the team. Now, Nate found himself facing a new set of challenges. Ones that had nothing to do with office drama and everything to do with the unresolved tension between him and Cole. Nate sat at his desk. His department was empty, and he was the only one still going through some final reports, trying to push away the thoughts that had been occupying his mind since Cole's confession. As if on cue, Cole appeared in the doorway of his cubicle. "Nate," Cole said, voice low, his usual flirtatious demeanor replaced with something more urgent. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Nate nodded, his pulse already racing as Cole stepped inside. "I just wanted to make sure everything's good," Cole began, glancing around briefly, then closing the door behind him. "With Ryan gone and the scandal settled, I hope you're feeling a little more at ease." Nate was about to respond when Cole's eyes locked onto his, darkening with something unspoken. Before Nate could even process, Cole took a step forward, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. Nate's breath caught as Cole's hand slid to the back of his neck, pulling him in gently. "Cole," Nate started, but his words were lost when Cole's lips crashed against his. The kiss was hungry, desperate, and everything Nate had been trying to ignore. He gripped Cole's shirt, his fingers curling into the fabric as their lips moved together. Cole's hands slid down Nate's back, pulling him flush against him, their bodies pressing together as the heat between them intensified. Cole broke the kiss for a moment. "I've wanted this since the moment I saw you, Nate." Nate swallowed, his pulse pounding in his ears. Before he could respond, Cole's hands moved quickly, lifting him slightly off the ground and placing him on his desk. Nate gasped as Cole's lips trailed down his neck, and Nate's hands found their way to Cole's shoulders, pulling him closer. "Cole!" Nate gasped, his head tilting back, his hands pushing Cole's shirt up to feel the warmth of his skin. Cole pulled away briefly, locking eyes with Nate. "Are you sure?" Nate's response was a breathless nod as he leaned in to kiss Cole again, his fingers moving to the button of Cole's shirt. There was no more hesitation between them now, just an undeniable pull that neither of them could fight. Cole's lips trailed down Nate's neck, sucking at the sensitive skin, making Nate moan softly. "I've wanted this," Cole murmured between kisses. "Wanted you, just you." As the kiss deepened, Cole's hands lifted Nate's shirt, tossing it aside as he leaned down to kiss Nate's chest. Nate's breath hitched as Cole's lips moved lower, his hands exploring Nate's body with urgency that matched Nate's own. "Cole!" Nate gasped, his hands gripping the edge of the desk as Cole's mouth continued its path downward. Cole's hands found the waistband of Nate's pants, unbuttoning them with ease. He glanced up at Nate, his eyes dark with desire. "I need you, Nate," he whispered. Nate's heart skipped a beat. "I need you too," Nate replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Cole didn't waste another moment. He leaned in, kissing Nate deeply once more, before lifting him up and carrying him to his private office. The next morning, Nate blinked, slowly waking up. He turned his head, finding himself in a strange yet strangely comforting place. Cole's bed. His heart skipped as the events of the previous night rushed back. He hadn't expected any of it, certainly not waking up next to Cole in the morning. Again, Nate shifted, turning to face Cole, who was still asleep, his features peaceful. It was more genuine than the confident entrepreneur he usually knew. For a moment, Nate just watched him. He felt comfort, yes, but he was also nervous. They had crossed the line. They were no longer just colleagues, but something more. A soft chuckle broke through his thoughts. "Not planning to run away this time, are you?" Cole's voice was sleepy, but teasing. Nate froze, then looked at Cole, his face flushing with embarrassment. I wasn't running away," he mumbled. Cole opened his eyes, smiling at him. "Good, because I was hoping we could talk about last night." Nate's heart skipped a beat. "Talk?" "Yeah," Cole said, propping himself up on one elbow, looking at Nate with a serious but warm gaze. "About us. About what this means." Nate swallowed. He wasn't sure how to approach this, or what to say, but there was something in Cole's eyes that made the fear inside him fade away. "Cole, Nate started, his voice a little shaky. "I don't know what this is, but—" Cole reached out, gently cupping Nate's cheek. "It's okay," he said quietly. "We'll figure it out. Together." Nate let out a relieved breath, leaning into Cole's touch. "Yeah, I'd like that." Cole smiled, his eyes full of affection. "Good, because I'm not letting you go." The weekend had passed, and by Monday, the intimacy between Nate and Cole had deepened. It was mid-afternoon, and the office had a lot going on and was lively. Nate had been avoiding Cole for most of the day, not because he wanted to, but because every time they locked eyes, he would be reminded of their weekend together, which made him blush and make little mistakes. That didn't stop Cole, though. He'd been finding excuses to summon Nate to his office all day, under the pretense of important matters. Nate had managed to dodge the first two, but the third was unavoidable. When Nate entered Cole's office, his heart was pounding. Cole stood by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out over the city. "You wanted to see me?" Nate asked, trying to sound professional, even as the memory of Cole's hands on his skin last night made him blush hard. Cole turned, a sly smile playing on his lips. "Close the door, Nate." Nate hesitated, glancing nervously down the hallway before closing the door. "What's this about?" Cole stepped closer, his voice teasing. "Do I need a reason to see my favorite accountant?" Nate rolled his eyes, his lips twitching as he tried not to smile. "Cole, we're at work." "And yet," Cole said, backing Nate toward the desk, "I can't seem to stop thinking about you." Before Nate could protest, Cole's hands were on his waist, pulling him closer. "Cole, someone could walk in," Nate whispered, even as his hands found their way to Cole's chest. "That's why the door's closed," Cole murmured, leaning in to kiss Nate. The kiss was soft at first, but quickly deepened. Cole pressed Nate against the desk, while Nate fisted Cole's shirt, pulling him closer. Just as Cole's hand slid lower, the door suddenly opened. "Mr. Kingston, I have the voice froze, followed by an audible gasp. Nate and Cole broke apart instantly, their faces flushed. Standing in the doorway was Cole's secretary, with a folder clutched in her hands, her eyes wide with shock. I'll come back later, she stammered, her face turning bright red as she backed out of the office, closing the door behind her. For a moment, there was silence. Then Cole burst into laughter. Oh my God, Nate groaned, covering his face with his hands. I'm going to die. Cole reached out, pulling Nate's hands away from his face. Relax, he said, grinning. It's not the end of the world. Nate glared at him. She walked in Cole. He ran a hand through his hair. I'll never live this down. What if she tells someone? What if everyone finds out? Cole walked over to the door, inspecting it closely. He jiggled the handle and gave it a firm push. Well, there's your problem, Cole said, turning back to Nate with a raised brow. The lock's busted. Nate froze mid-pace, his face turning pale. You mean anyone could have walked in? Cole nodded, shrugging. Apparently. I'll get maintenance on it. That's not the point. Nate groaned, collapsing into one of the office chairs. I'm going to be the talk of the entire office. And it's your fault. Cole smirked, leaning down to cup Nate's cheek. Relax, Nate. Rebecca is not the type to gossip. She's been with me for years. Nate gave him a doubtful look. You really trust her not to say anything? Absolutely, Cole said confidently. But if it makes you feel better, I'll talk to her. Before Nate could respond, there was a soft knock on the door. Come in, Cole called, stepping back. Rebecca opened the door cautiously, her cheeks still pink. She avoided looking directly at them and held out the folder she'd been carrying earlier. Mr. Kingston, here are the reports you requested. Thanks, Rebecca, Cole said, taking the folder from her. Then, with a knowing smile, he added, and about earlier, I didn't see anything. Rebecca interrupted quickly, her voice firm but kind. And I won't say anything, either. Your personal life is none of my business. Nate let out a visible sigh of relief, but Rebecca turned to him, a playful smile tugging at her lips. That said, Nate, you owe me coffee for the near heart attack. Nate blinked, surprised by her light-hearted tone. Sure. Rebecca chuckled, her expression softening. Don't worry, Nate. It's not a big deal. And if it makes you feel any better, I think you two are kind of cute together. Cole grinned, clearly amused, while Nate turned a shade of red that could rival a tomato. Rebecca continued, I'll leave you both to your work. But seriously, Nate, coffee. My desk tomorrow morning. With that, she gave him a small wave and left the office. The door closed behind her, leaving Nate staring after her in shock. She's okay with this? He asked, almost disbelieving. Told you, Cole said, wrapping an arm around Nate's shoulders. Nate sighed, finally allowing himself to relax. Still, we should keep our hands to ourselves for now. Cole laughed, pulling Nate closer. Don't think this means I'm done sneaking kisses from you. Nate rolled his eyes, but couldn't stop the smile that spread across his face. The next morning, Nate found himself standing awkwardly at Rebecca's desk, holding 2 cups of coffee. He felt like a nervous intern about to report to their supervisor. Morning, she greeted cheerfully, glancing up from her monitor. You remembered. She reached out for the coffee, smiling warmly. Of course, Nate said, setting the cup down and fidgeting with his tie. It's the least I could do after. You know. Rebecca took a sip, savoring the taste before leaning back in her chair. Relax, Nate. I told you it's no big deal. I mean, it was a little shocking to walk in on my boss and a colleague making out, but hey, who doesn't love a good workplace romance? Nate choked on air, his face heating up. It's not a romance, he blurted, then immediately regretted it when Rebecca arched an eyebrow, looking thoroughly unconvinced. She said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Because casually kissing your boss in his office is just a normal Monday activity, right? Nate ran a hand over his face. Okay, fine, maybe it's a little complicated. Rebecca laughed softly, setting her coffee aside. Relax, Nate. I'm not judging you. Honestly, I think it's kind of sweet. Cole's been single for ages, and he's obviously into you. And you. Well, you look like you've got it bad, too. Nate hesitated, her words hitting a little too close to home. It's just, I don't know if this is a good idea. He's my boss, and it's messy. Rebecca finished, her smile turning softer. Sure, it could be, but it doesn't have to be. Cole's a good guy, Nate, and from what I've seen, you're good for him. Nate blinked, surprised by her sincerity. You really think so? Rebecca nodded. I wouldn't say it if I didn't mean it. Just be careful, okay? Office romances are tricky, but if anyone can make it work, it's probably you too. Nate managed a small smile, his nerves easing. Thanks, Rebecca. I mean it. Anytime, she said with a wink. Now go. Your boss has been staring at you from his office for the past 5 minutes, and he's not exactly subtle about it. Nate turned toward Cole's office, and sure enough, there he was, leaning against the glass wall, smirking like he didn't have a care in the world. Nate rolled his eyes, muttering under his breath as he made his way over. Later that evening, Cole and Nate sat on the couch in Cole's apartment. The city lights reflected from outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow over the room. "I talked to Rebecca," Nate said, breaking the comfortable silence. Cole leaned back, raising an eyebrow. "What did she say?" "She said we're kind of sweet together," Nate admitted, his cheeks flushing. Cole grinned, reaching over to take Nate's hand. "She's right, you know. About us being sweet?" Nate teased, though his tone was light. "That, and the fact that I'm completely into you," Cole said, his voice soft but unwavering. Nate's heart skipped, and he looked down at their joined hands. "It still feels surreal. Like, how do we even get here?" Cole chuckled, squeezing his hand gently. "A wild party, a broken lock, and a very nosy secretary?" Nate laughed, the sound filling the room. "When you put it that way, it sounds ridiculous." "Maybe," Cole said, leaning in closer, his expression turning serious. "But it also feels right, doesn't it?" Nate met his gaze, the sincerity in Cole's eyes making his chest tighten. "Yeah," he admitted quietly. "It does." They sat in silence for a moment. Finally, Cole spoke, his tone playful but affectionate. "So, Nate," he said, brushing a strand of hair from Nate's face, "what do you say we figure out the rest of this crazy thing together?" Nate smiled, leaning into Cole's touch. "I'd like that," as Cole pulled him into a gentle kiss. Nate couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something truly amazing. The next week, Nate couldn't ignore Cole's odd behavior. He would send texts like "just wait till Friday" or disappear during work hours. By the time Friday rolled around, Cole appeared at Nate's desk just before lunch with a mischievous grin. "Plans tonight?" Cole asked casually, leaning on Nate's desk. Nate raised an eyebrow. "Not unless you count Netflix and takeout." "Great. Clear your evening. Where's something nice? I'll pick you up at 7. Before Nate could respond, Cole had already walked away, making him roll his eyes. At 7 sharp, Cole showed up at Nate's door dressed in a black suit with a bouquet of Nate's favorite flowers. Lilies and wildflowers. Nate blinked, stunned. "What's this?" Nate asked, accepting the flowers with a smile. "It's a surprise," Cole said, his grin widening. Nate followed Cole to the sleek black car waiting outside. They pulled up at a dimly lit garden surrounded by string lights. Nate couldn't help but compare it to rom-coms cliché movies. "What is this place?" he asked. "You'll see," Cole said, taking his hand and leading him inside a small restaurant. The place was decked out with fairy lights, candles, and a small table set for 2. "Cole," Nate whispered. "What is all this?" Cole smiled, pulling out a chair for Nate. "Nothing, just dinner." After a delicious meal, Cole stood up, a nervous look on his face. "Nate," he began, "I know I can be a little much sometimes, teasing you, pushing your buttons, showing up unannounced. But the truth is, it's because I've never wanted anything as badly as I want to be with you." Nate's heart pounded as Cole reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box. For a moment, Nate panicked, thinking it was a ring, but Cole opened it to reveal a simple yet elegant gold bracelet. "This isn't a proposal," Cole said, as if reading Nate's mind. "But it is a promise. I promise to be patient when you need space, to support you when things get tough, and to always make you laugh, even if it's at my expense." Cole knelt in front of Nate, holding the bracelet up. "Nate, will you be my boyfriend? Officially?" Nate stared at him, his eyes filling with tears. "You did all this just to ask me that?" Cole smirked. "Of course. Go big or go home, right?" Laughing, Nate nodded. "Yes, yes, I'll be your boyfriend." Cole grinned, slipping the bracelet on Nate's wrist before pulling him into a kiss. "You really went all out, huh?" Nate said, after they pulled away, looking at Cole with a teasing smile. "You're worth it," Cole replied, leaning in to kiss his forehead. Nate couldn't help but feel lucky to have a man like Cole in his life. The end.